Hello friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I'm Joycey Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about the temporary economic slowdown and the lessons to be learned from these temporary economic slowdowns. So we know that the Indian economy is going through a phase of economic slowdown. So what is meant by an economic slowdown? An economic slowdown means the output generated from the economy declines. Now, the output generated from an economy is indicated by GDP. GDP is the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in an economy in a financial year. So, GDP is actually the output of an economy, and it is in terms of GDP that we calculate the growth rate of an economy. We have seen that in the quarter 1 of this financial year, India has recorded a growth rate of only just 5%. This means that the performance of Indian economy in terms of output generation is very poor. So in this context, we will be looking at some of the lessons that has to be learned from the economic slowdown. Now, this is a very different lecture. In many previous lectures, we have discussed about the reasons or the causes of economic slowdown, the measures taken by RBI, that is the monetary policy we have discussed. We have also discussed about the fiscal policy, that is the policies taken by the central government or the finance ministry. We have discussed about the fiscal stimulus package introduced by the finance ministry. So we have covered various perspectives, various aspects of this economic slowdown. But in this lecture today, we will be looking at what was missed, why there was a lack of preparedness, and how this lack of preparedness has impacted the economic slowdown. So these topics will be the main focus today. So let us move on to the current affair. Let us see what is the current affair related to this. So we have seen that the economy is at present going through a economic slowdown or a slowdown phase. So Indian economy going through an economic slowdown, and in order to cope up with the slowdown, the RBI has come up with monetary policy. The finance ministry has come up with fiscal policy or the central government. But most of the reforms and policies aim at weeding out the adverse impacts of the slowdown. But none of them, either the RBI or the finance ministry, has come up with measures that will act as preparedness for the economic slowdown or for any further economic slowdown. So here what we see is that there is a lack of preparedness even in the past and even now. In order to face further intense slowdown, we are not prepared enough. So there is a serious lack of preparedness. So we will be reflecting on this in this lecture. Let us take the example of automobile sector. So we will consider this example, and based on this illustration, we will understand why there is a lack of preparedness and how this lack of preparedness has impacted the present economic slowdown. So let us first see what is the background. So we know Indian economy is going through a economic slowdown and most of the sectors are impacted. So with certain limited exceptions, most of the sectors are impacted. And one such sector is the automobile sector. And automobile sector is one sector which has been seriously affected, very severely affected due to the economic slowdown. So let us take the example of automobile sector here and let us understand how there was a lack of preparedness. Now, when we talk about the automobile sector, it is all about the sale of automobile. So, the automobile sector is concentrated upon the sale of the automobile in the country. Now, for the last many years, for decades actually, the government, the policy makers, various other stakeholders, everyone was concentrating on something called pollution. Pollution, as you know, it is an externality or a negative externality caused from the automobile sector. When the use of automobile increases, the rate or the level of pollution also increases. So it is an externality or a negative externality caused due to the automobile sector. Now, what are the other externalities, negative externalities caused by the automobile sector? Another one is congestion. That is, when there is an increased use of vehicles on road, this will cause congestion, thereby reduce the productivity. So, increase congestion. Another one is the number of accidents. So, congestion can also lead to increased number of accidents caused due to the increased number of automobiles, especially in the cities. So these are all some of the externalities. One is pollution, second one is congestion, third one is accidents. So these are certain externalities caused by the automobile sector, and for decades we are talking about reducing these externalities. So let us come to the solutions. The policy makers and different stakeholders also came up with solutions in order to deal with these externalities. One solution was to promote mass transport systems. This includes public transport systems like the buses, metros, trains, etc. Now, what was the reason? The mass public transport systems or the mass transport systems, they are environment friendly. That means they cause lesser pollution. They are less polluting. Now, they are also cheaper, faster and safer. Now, let us see. Here certain issues are addressed. First one, the pollution. So, pollution levels comes down. This was one first externality. So, this is addressed. Second one, it is cheaper. Third one is that it is faster. That means congestion levels can be brought down. Next, it is safer. That means the number of accidents can be brought down. So, by introducing these solutions, what has happened? They have actually brought down the externalities. Now, second one, another solution suggested was the increased use of paratransit. For example, taxis, rickshaws, etc. that will complement the public transport. That means this paratransit will ensure last mile connectivity. So, from the public transport, this ensures last mile connectivity, and this will supplement or complement the public transport systems. So, these were two important solutions suggested by the policy makers in order to deal with the externalities caused by the automobile sector. Now, let us have a close look at the solutions suggested. Now, the solution suggests that there should be increased use of public transport and also paratransit should be promoted. Now, we need to understand whether these solutions are feasible. So, we will understand that these solutions are feasible to a larger extent. What are the reasons? The first reason for being feasible is that the urban infrastructure cannot keep pace with the increasing number of automobiles. That means when the number of automobiles in the urban areas increases, the infrastructure cannot be in pace with that. This will definitely lead to congestion. So, reducing the number of automobiles on road will definitely be a solution to congestion. Now, second reason, the cost of owning a vehicle is very high in India. So, what happens is that even in developed economies, there is an emerging trend that people prefer taxis or such other alternatives other than owning of vehicles. This is not only because the cost is very high, this is also because of the congestion factor. Now, third thing, the logistics cost. So, logistics cost in India is very high, and this is very high compared to the developed world. So, all these reasons make these solutions very feasible. That means the solutions are very feasible to be adopted. So, what will happen as a result? As a result, these solutions are implemented. So, what will happen? First, the use of public transport will increase. Second one, the paratransit will also increase. So, what can be the impact of these two implementation of the solutions? The immediate impact is that there will be a fall in the sale of automobiles. Is it clear for you? So, we must understand here that in order to avoid certain externalities, certain negative externalities, the policy makers itself has come up with certain solutions, and the implementation of these solutions will have a cascading effect or a negative impact on some other sectors. That is, when one sector gains or when one target is achieved, definitely some other target has to be compromised. In our example here, for achieving the target of reducing externalities, what has happened? The impact is that there was a reduction in the automobile sales. So if one good thing has to happen, another thing has to be sacrificed. So this is very evident. Now, what is the problem here? The government itself, the policy makers itself had suggested all these measures and solutions, but they were not prepared enough to face an automobile slowdown. It was very evident that by promoting public transport or by promoting paratransit, the automobile sector sale will definitely come down. This was very clear. But even knowing that, the economy, the policy makers were not planned and prepared to receive this consequence. So this is what we said, there was a lack of preparedness. Now let us see what are the impact of these solutions or the implementation of these solutions. For that, let us look into the ICRA study. So ICRA has conducted a study in 2008. So ICRA has come out with certain findings. The first one is regarding the implementation of GST. We know that GST was able to create a unified and single market in India. Now, let us take the example of trucks which operate interstate in order to conduct interstate trade. So, those trucks that travel from one state to another in order to conduct interstate trade. Now, the turnaround time for the trucks have come down at least by 1/5. This is because now there are no longer interstate checkposts. So interstate checkposts have been removed, and because of the absence of these checkposts, what has happened? The turnover time has reduced. What does it imply? It implies that more trips can be made possible by a single truck. So what will happen? There will definitely be a slump in the demand for new trucks. This is because the already existing trucks are able to meet more targets. So there is no need for addition of trucks. So definitely the demand will come down. So this is an impact. So what does it imply? It implies that the productivity improvement in one sector will imply the catastrophe for another one. Here the productivity of the trucks have increased. That means the productivity, the logistics productivity has increased. Now, how it has created a negative consequence for another sector? This has resulted into a slump in the sale of automobiles. So, this clearly means that when one sector's productivity increases, it has a negative influence on another one. Now, another example mentioned in the ICRA study is regarding public transport, which we have already discussed in detail. So, there were many years of planning, campaigning, and also the government had incurred lots of expenditure on improving the public transport system and the paratransit system in the country, especially in some major cities. Now, during the phase of planning and implementation, it was clear for the policy makers that by promoting public transport and promoting paratransit, the demand for the automobiles is expected to come down. So, we should have definitely expected the vehicle sales to fall as a result of these changes. And we should have prepared for the alternatives, which we did not do. So, the response to the current fall in the sale of automobiles indicates that there was a lack of preparedness. So even though the economy itself has signaled such type of demand fall or a fall in the sales, we were not prepared enough for it. So this definitely indicates that there was a lack of preparedness. Now, here the biggest question is that what will happen if the same scenario continues, and if larger, now it's just a minor economic slowdown, and if major economic slowdown enters the Indian economy, if we are not prepared, how we are going to face the consequences of major economic slowdowns. Now let us see the sectoral interconnectedness, that is when one sector gains, how does another one loses. We have already seen some examples of automobile sector. Also we have seen about the GST. Now let us take some minor examples. For example, wheeled luggage. So introduction of wheeled luggage or increased use of wheeled luggage result in the porters in the railway stations going out of business. So this is an improvement in technology, but the porters in the railway stations, they are at loss, they will lose their business. Now another example is cycle rickshaws. So the cycle rickshaws are these days being replaced by motorized rickshaws. Another example, the coal or the petroleum sector. Now the petroleum and the coal sector is showing a decline. This is because there is an increased concentration on generating renewable energy. So in all these examples, one sector is gaining, and the gain of one sector has got a negative cascading effect on the other sector. Now what are the implications? What is to be understood? First thing that we need to understand is that whenever changes take place, changes are inevitable, and whenever changes takes place, disruption is inevitable. So changes will anyways take place, and therefore disruptions also. So what is required? We need to be prepared for the disruptions. And we know that the Indian economy and the world economy itself is moving or marching towards better adoption of technology, digitization, green public policies, etc. So these are some of the major focus areas of Indian economy as well as the world economy. So this interventions or these changes definitely will have distortions as well. These changes are in lines with the national welfare, the societal welfare, the environmental welfare, the ethical governance, etc. So as a result of all these changes, several sectors will be impacted. So what has to be done? The economy should be prepared enough to deal with this changes and distortions. So we can connect this with the current economic slowdown as well. So what has happened? The current economic slowdown is also a consequence or a result of the past policies adopted by the government and the lack of preparedness for these policies. So this is a very, very important topic, and this is one perspective that most of them misses. So when we talk about economic slowdown, we talk about slump in the demand, we talk about the external factors, but most of them forget about the consequences of the past policies. So this is very, very important. You can find the PDF of this lecture on our website www.studiiq.com. You can follow my Facebook page for more video updates. You can write to me at joycey.studyiq@gmail.com for any of your queries and clarification. Thank you.